everybody should be able to see the presentation on screen now. Yeah. Richard, I'd like to hand the floor over to yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and join you. It's great to have that opportunity. And can I start by saying that I am thoroughly impressed by the work that you've been doing as a forum, and just would echo the point that Richard, you made as part of your address about how professional an approach has been taken. And the reason I comment on that is not just to flatter you, but I think it does put you in a stronger position to exercise influence over your future. So I really commend what you've been doing. What I thought I would cover, if I may, if we can move to the next slide, is just a brief word about why would we have a development company or a development corporation, and then say a little bit about ambition. I kind of want to build on some of the opening remarks about collaboration, and then give a flavour of some of the early things that we're thinking about and the current focus that flows from that. So I'll run through this fairly briefly and then open it up to discussion when I've done so. So why would we have a DevCo? And in essence, it's these reasons you can see on the slide, and I think it's reflected in what's been said so far. We do want to try and deliver something on this site and the other two sites that are within the purview of DevCo, which is special and which everybody feels brings benefit. And as part of that, I think it's important that we don't just think about the here and now, but we kind of take into account the changes that are affecting all of our lives. And you know, in many ways, I think you can see some of those changes have been accelerated by the awful pandemic that we've all been going through. The shift towards more people shopping online rather than going to traditional retail outlets. And I'm not saying that's going to continue indefinitely, that there won't be a rebalance. But nevertheless, I think, you know, we have seen a change in shopping patterns. We've certainly seen a change in the kind of working arrangements that people have, with a greater emphasis on some people spending some of their time working from home. And there's certainly, I think, an ever greater premium being associated with a more sustainable lifestyle. That does kind of connect with the point here about blue and green infrastructure, but I think it's more than that. So as part of what we're trying to do, we're trying to kind of think about how people's lives, people's expectations are changing, and in order to kind of help facilitate the types of development that we're talking about, which will, let's be frank, take a period of time to come on stream, there does need to be some kind of focused energy brought to bear on delivering on these opportunities, and also some coordination, because when you're dealing with developments of the scale that we're talking about across the three sites that are within our purview, they involve a multitude of players. They involve a multitude of local stakeholders, government. We've already heard reference to some government decisions that we're all waiting on, but also various other agencies that play into this, be it people that have responsibility for infrastructure, road networks, all those sorts of things. So something that helps kind of knit all this together to help us create something special is really the justification for having a DevCo. So moving on from that, if I may, let's just talk about what the overarching ambition is, and this is for DevCo across the three sites that we're interested in. And Richard mentions the significance of the Midlands engine, and we're, if you like, an instrument of the ambitions that the Midlands engine have talked about. As part of the process that we've needed to go through, we were required to submit a business case to government, making the argument, if you like, for the DevCo. That went in back in March, and that outlined the potential to deliver significantly more jobs in the area, new homes, and that uplift in the regional economy, almost £4.8 billion worth of uplift. So the scale of the ambition is significant. The opportunity, if you like, is significant, and that's why it needs some kind of focused energy to try and bring it about. So what does all that mean in practice? So just to recap on the 3 sites that fall within the purview of the DevCo. So obviously the one that you're most concerned with at the moment, the Toton and Chetwynd site, where apart from anything else, I think there is an opportunity to kind of think about the next generation of living as we've described here. So a greater emphasis on sustainability, for example, not just because of our shared concern, I'm sure, to ensure that we're minimising the impacts that we're seeing of climate change that we're all familiar with, but because we know it's possible to think about new forms of housing which are more energy efficient and actually therefore more affordable for people to run those homes. So it's a kind of double win that we're looking for. Thinking about, particularly relevant in the context of things like the area around the East Midlands Airport, how will people move around in the future? And again, there's an obvious link here with the climate change agenda. So how do we achieve a shift away from our current dependence on fossil fuels? We all know the justification for doing that. So how do we tap into the technologies? How do we draw on some of the indigenous assets in our universities locally to think about the application of the technologies that enable people to move around in better ways? And then thinking about the Ratcliffe site, again, future energy generation, for example, how do we make that carbon free? And what is the future of work in that context? I talked about the impact of digitization. You know, in the future, there might be a greater emphasis on robotics and all that type of thing. What does that mean for work and the type of work that people will do? And how do we ensure that future generations of children will be equipped with the skills that enable them to take advantage of the opportunities that come to these 3 really significant sites? The scale of these sites is really easily overlooked. I mean, they're each bigger than the Olympic Park in London. So that's why I think they represent such an opportunity for the region. So then moving on from that, I just wanted to build on the theme that I think came through very much from Richard's opening remarks about the emphasis on collaboration. So the DevCo at the moment is a company limited by guarantee, and it's owned by 5 local authorities, of which Broxton is one of those in Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire. But ultimately, the intention is that it would become a statutory body, a locally led vehicle, which sits in contrast to what's sometimes been introduced in other parts of the country. So that says something about the importance of collaborating with local stakeholders and including the local community. Community engagement is at the heart of the way the DevCo thinks. And so when I joined DevCo at the back end of May, the fact that you have an established neighbourhood forum that has already done so much work, and Richard again referred in his opening remarks to some of the things that you've contributed to or worked on, is a major asset. And I think when we come to unlock the potential of that commercial interest can bring to this whole project, actually making sure that they build off and connect with the degree of community engagement that has taken place is really important. So it's in our DNA, if you like. And beyond that, particularly relevant in the context of the areas in which you live, actually looking for opportunities to secure better connections between communities. I think that's really important. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize how, for me, it's really important that these projects are taken forward in a way that engages with people, rather than people being left feeling as if they have been done to. So the next couple of images simply reflect some of those pieces of work that Richard already referred to in his opening remarks, which I think do reflect that emphasis on community engagement, community collaboration. So I won't dwell on this or the next slide, which reflects the work done on the error wash study, but I think it does represent a tangible manifestation of the approach. So I talked about those broader ambitions and the potential to see these 3 sites that we're concerned with developed or make a contribution to the regional economy that is really, really significant. So let's try and crystallize some of the sort of near-term ambitions. So we recently had an opportunity to submit some proposals to government as part of what's called the spending review, which ultimately feeds through to some of the financial decisions that government makes. We put forward some initial thoughts, which we are asking government to help unlock. And these may change over time, they may be finessed, but to give you a flavour of what they contain. So first of all, there's some ongoing support, financial support, that we're looking for to match the financial contributions that the 5 local authorities that own us have put into the operation. But then there's a series of capital projects that we are looking to take forward. And as I say, some of these may happen, some of these may not, but to give you an indication. So one of them is referred to as immersion rooms. That's an interesting title, but what we're looking for is some sort of facility, a temporary facility, that would help with the engagement, particularly of young people. And the reason I personally feel that's very important is twofold. So firstly, because the development of these sites won't just affect current residents, it will also be something that affects future generations. So the more that we can engage and take into account the perspectives of young people, I think that's really helpful. But the second is because if we are successful in unlocking the potential job opportunities that could come here, then it's really important that we start exciting young people about what those job opportunities might look like, in order that they can be supported to acquire the skills that will be necessary to take advantage of those job opportunities. And I've been involved in projects up and down the country throughout my career, and at times I've seen new developments come on stream which have brought new job opportunities, but they haven't always been accessed by people living close to them. At times, actually, people from quite far away have moved into the area or have travelled in order to take those job opportunities. And that's been a product of local people not having been given the skills, if you like, in order to take advantage. So it's really important that we start reaching into the schools network, into further education colleges as well as universities, in order to kind of make sure that they understand what might be coming and they equip future generations with the skills that are necessary. And as part of that, you need to excite young people about those opportunities. And then there's some projects which are around what's known as zero. So this is actually moving to carbon-free living and a carbon-free economy. So some specific proposals around that. And again, an emphasis on one of them at least, around some sort of training academy. So again, recognizing that if we are to grow and take advantage of the opportunity of moving towards a greener economy, then there is a set of skills that are going to be required in order to do that. there's an awful lot of intellectual capability amongst our universities, as I mentioned earlier. But for that to materialize into commercial opportunities, you also need the skills base. So that's why I keep emphasizing the importance of the skills agenda. And then there are some specific proposals which are in keeping with what I was talking about earlier, around looking at the new forms of energy storage, and some suggestions about research capability, a facility that would help take that forward. Again, harnessing some of the work of our local universities. So there's a lot more that could be said about that, but hopefully it just gives you a flavour for some of the initial proposals that we've invited government to think about. They won't back them all, I'm sure, but we might be able to gain some support for taking some of those forward and begin to start giving some expression to those broader ambitions that I talked about right at the onset. And then finally, I was just going to say a few words about what our focus is on in the near term. So the first is what we're referring to here as soft market testing. So this is where we're talking to potential commercial players about the opportunities, and perhaps potentially unlocking some commercial interest from organisations that haven't previously been active in the East Midlands. They may have been active in other parts of the country, may have been active in other parts of the world, but haven't previously thought about the East Midlands. So kind of giving them some visibility about what's on offer here, and also thinking about what sort of package of arrangements we'd need to put in place that would entice them to come and be part of that journey, but at the same time ensuring that they understand the things that are important. So it's no good just coming and getting involved without an appreciation of the things that we attach particular value to. And amongst those is the emphasis on moving towards a low carbon, zero carbon environment, moving towards a greater emphasis on community engagement and collaboration in the development opportunities than perhaps sometimes happens elsewhere. So those sorts of things. So we're doing a lot of talking to some interesting players at the moment, and I have to say there's a degree of interest in these opportunities, and the bolder the ambition, the greater interest that attracts, and I think that's very healthy. There's a lot of work we're doing with government, some of it behind the scenes. So some of it relates to what I alluded to beforehand, putting the DevCo in a position where it becomes a statutory organisation, and also trying to unlock some of those financial contributions and help government align its decision making to some of the opportunities that we see here. In parallel, there are other sort of agencies of government that we're talking a lot with, and again, Richard referred to at least one of those in his opening remarks. So Homes England are an important player for us, and working through with them what contribution they can make to realise the ambitions that there are locally. And then as part of demonstrating that we're serious in all of this, there's some work that we're doing, which is kind of about the mechanics of the way the DevCo will work. But it's the thing that is important in this context is, given the complexity of the projects that we're involved in, and the point I made earlier about a whole range of different stakeholders involved, it's important to kind of find the best way of bringing a blend of what the public sector offers, particularly through the local authorities, but also some of those other governmental agencies, but at the same time, private sector, people with private sector experience. So our board at the moment comprises representatives from each of the 5 local authorities that own us, but we're also looking to recruit an independent chair on an interim basis for the moment, and then some private sector non-executive directors. So we're making some significant headway on that. And then ultimately, if the DevCo becomes a statutory body, it will have planning powers. So we need to think through, and are doing some thinking on this, around how those planning powers will be discharged. To be clear, those planning powers will only relate to the sites that are within our remit. They won't extend to the wider planning powers of the local authorities. But we just need to do a little bit of thinking about how they will operate in practice. So in summary, just to conclude, I want to thank you again for the work that you have done, which I think kind of really represents a solid foundation for us to take these ambitions forward. I think it really is a really important opportunity for this region, but it's really important as well that it's rooted in that engagement with local people. So once again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on this evening.
Richard, thank you very much, and thanks for the presentation. You know, it's important, as we've said, I think jointly. You know, I think we did your first walk around the site in May this year, to give you an appreciation of the scale of the site over the thing, and we all got muddy boots that day, and thankfully you weren't part of the equation that we had maybe 6 months before, where we had a potential COVID situation happen, but it was a bright sunny day and we had some very informative discussions that day. I'm just going to ask David to let us know if there's any questions for yourself, Richard, before we move to closing comments and any other business.
Yeah, so we've had 2 questions come through during your presentation, Richard. One from David Reed. The EMDevCo website says that it will appoint 2 infrastructure people: group manager, planning and infrastructure, transport and infrastructure manager. What will be the scope of these infrastructure roles, and in particular, will infrastructure for cycling and walking be within the scope of the appointees' job descriptions?
Thank you. Infrastructure underpins any development, doesn't it? And you know, if I were to be critical about some of the development that has taken place in parts of the country, at times it feels as if the infrastructure comes late. And you know that there are some existing pressures on some aspects of infrastructure, and I mean in this context infrastructure in its broadest sense. So people, you know, naturally gravitate towards things like roads, and absolutely that's part of the equation, but it is broader than that. So to answer the specific, it has to take into account opportunities for cycling, walking, all those sorts of things. Gosh, if we've learned anything over the last 12, 18 months, it is the importance of people being able to do those simple things like walk and cycle to their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being. So absolutely it has to cover that. But actually, there are other elements of infrastructure that we need to be concerned with. When I talk to some existing businesses that are here in the region already, so it's not just about those that might come here in the future, do you know what comes through those conversations is one of the biggest issues for them is access to the grid, so access to power. And there are some challenges about the way an expansion of capacity, you know, power supply, is managed in the UK. So to go back to a more direct answer to the question, it is infrastructure in its broadest sense. It absolutely has to take into account things like cycling and walking, as well as those things that people naturally think of. But I would actually go beyond that and say that it also needs to think about some of those things which we take for granted, power, water, all those sorts of things, which are often potential inhibitors that people don't always foresee. So that's why those type of roles are important to us.
Okay, thanks, Richard. I guess it also, in that broadly sense, will cover as well as active travel, sustainable travel,
yeah,
and obviously the other things within our plan, which all those things are in, I think, around high-speed internet connectivity as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, can any of us, again, if we reflect on the experience of the pandemic, where we've all become incredibly dependent on broadband connectivity, I mean, can anybody conceive of a situation where, we would expect people to live their lives without access to high levels of connectivity? And actually, we talk about broadband, but there are parts of the country, and I don't know the extent to which that's an issue locally, but there are parts of the country where even mobile phone signals leave a lot to be desired. So it goes back to my point about it has to be infrastructure in its broadest sense, doesn't it?
Okay, yes, thank you. And then the second question, which I think sums up what's on everybody's lips at the moment from Graham Hill, is what will be the impact on EMDevCo's ambitions and aspirations for the area, especially the Toton and Chetwynd, if the eastern leg of HS2 is, as per current rumours, delayed, curtailed, or cancelled?
Yeah. So first of all, we, along with every other partner, I think, in the region, are trying to kind of impress on the powers that be, the potential benefit of HS2. But I go back to what I said earlier about the significance of these three sites that sit within the purview of the DevCo. They are enormously important opportunities. And it's a little bit like Richard was suggesting in his opening address. You can't control everything, you can't foresee every development, but you have to find a way of nevertheless realizing the ambitions. So if we found ourselves in a situation where the outcome that the region has been advocating in terms of HS2 didn't materialize in quite the timescale that we hoped, I still think there are enormous opportunities associated with all three of our sites, and it will not deflect us from doing everything in our power to deliver the very best outcomes for the sites and for the people that are affected by those. So I have no more of a crystal ball than anybody else does about what some of the decision making will be, but what it will be, and we will respond to it in a way that, as I say, is appropriate to enable us to deliver the ambitions. I still think these sites present some really exciting opportunities regardless.
Richard, thank you so much, and I'd like to thank you from the forum and from the community. You have given your personal time this evening to come along and do this presentation. I think what we wanted to demonstrate is that collaborative approach with what could be the major stakeholder and the major decision maker as we move through this process. And we obviously encourage the community's involvement and collaboration with EMDevCo as you move forward, and look forward to working with you in the future as well.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you.